What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and welcome back for another podcast. Today, we're joined by a good friend of mine, Jason Moe. Also moved over from poker into cryptocurrency. Got a lot of different topics we're going to be talking about today, including why is the Rio still on the strip? But before we get there, I have a couple quick things I want to talk about as well. First up, we're looking to hire talented people over at Coin Central. If you're interested in a position, we have a link in the bio below. And second up, next week, we're going to be joined by Housey Miner, the founder of CNET, and also the founder of VideoCoin, a new project. It'll be interesting to hear what he has to say about that. Should be some good subjects to talk about as well. And then a little further down the road, we're going to be joined on the podcast by Tone Vase. So lots of great guests lined up. If you've not subscribed to the podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And also remember, we're on every podcasting medium at this point. I believe we're on iTunes and Spotify and all that great stuff. So if you want to check out the podcast on the go, you can do so on your platform of choice. All right, let's jump into it. Jason, thank you for joining us today, man.
Yeah, pleasure to be finally on the podcast.
I know it's been a little bit. I wanted to have you on kind of from the get-go, but you're a busy man. You're up to a lot these days.
Yeah. But we made it happen though, so it's all good.
We eventually did 10:30 my time, but we got there, so that's what's important.
Yeah.
So let's kick this off. I like to kick things off here by jumping right into the tough questions. And so I think that this question is one that's been asked a lot and needs an answer, which is, why on Twitter is your name Cunty Cakes?
I think you know the backstory behind this. So I used to play like a lot of video games when I was younger. Played like a bunch of the Blizzard games, played a lot of Dota back when Dota was a Warcraft 3 mod instead of like a standalone game it is now. And my screen name on while playing Dota was Carry Cakes, which is also my Poker Stars and Full Tilt screen name when I played poker. So I guess for those unfamiliar with gaming, carry in those games sort of means that you're like the what's it called? They have a specific name for it now, but I've been out of playing Dota for so long. But the carry's the guy just like farms up all the gold, and like at the end of the game, he just destroys everyone, essentially. And then I think the cunty part came when I visited Australia a few times, and it was just like the culture there. Everyone just calls each other a cunt, and I found it hilarious. So I just added that to my name.
It is funny in Australia, having been there a few times. You know, in America, that's not exactly a word that people like to use, right? It's a word that's more frowned upon. But yeah, when you're down under, people just call each other a cunt all the time, and it's like, all right, so I guess we're going to be doing things a little differently, around here.
It's almost like the Australian version of bro, or something similar.
Yeah, something like that. We'll leave it there. So, look, man, like I feel like back in the day, we used to hang out all the time. Back in a lot of the high stakes battles, obviously we were roommates at a few different points. I feel like now that you're mainly based out of Asia and I'm still here in Las Vegas, I don't really get to see you too much. What have you been up to? Like, what have you been focusing on more with your time these days?
The past like 3 months or so, I've been traveling quite a bit. I attended some blockchain conferences. There are a few here in Bangkok. There was one in Tokyo. Actually, the one in Tokyo. I actually went to Tokyo for 2 weeks, and I went to, it was like a 2-day conference, and I went to maybe like a few hours of it. But by that point, I was just sort of burnt out with, talking to people about crypto, essentially getting shilled whatever ICOs or whatever coins people are attempting to sell me. And I just took like a few weeks off, like enjoyed the city. A lot of my friends were there. I met up with quite a few people, like within either the poker or cryptocurrency community outside of the formal conferences. It was Sakura in Tokyo. It's when the cherry blossoms are. So like if you go to the parks, it's like really nice. And I just got back, and I'm honestly not doing too much right now in terms of like what I was doing before, which was a lot of cryptocurrency trading, investing in ICOs, and like I would do like quite a bit of arbitrage, a whole bunch of crypto related stuff, but I haven't really gotten back into it. I think the past few months or so. I guess we can talk about this later, but the ICO market, especially for good projects, has been extremely limited or has dried up, or specifically allocations for those projects are not publicly available. So it's a lot less work for me than what I was doing maybe like 6 to 9 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about that at some point. Now seems like a fine time. So it seems like the ICO market has shifted a lot in just a brief period of time. I've only really been, looking at it for the last, let's just say 6 to 9 months. I didn't get in very early, but it's interesting having seen what happened from October to December, where it seemed like there were many, many good opportunities and a lot of different ones that really kind of blasted off. And then we look at the last few months, especially given that the overall value of the market has dropped so much, it seems like there are less good opportunities. People, and then also because of the amount of money that projects are able to raise, they can be a little bit more particular with who they choose to take money from. What's your take on that in general?
So I guess from the beginning, if you look at the history of ICOs, I'd say Ethereum would be the first project that essentially went to ICO. I actually remember this because I was in a poker / cryptocurrency chat. This is when like the major coins were like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Namecoin, Peercoin, stuff like that. And someone made a post about Ethereum, and they just linked the original Bitcoin Talk Ethereum post, and I was like, wow, it's interesting conceptually, but the whole idea of an ICO of someone developing a coin and selling it versus like a consensus proof of work coin like what Bitcoin is, where it's mined over a period of time, seemed kind of scammy to me. But this is like in 2000, I want to say 2015. So since then, I'd say the ICO market has evolved quite a bit, where it's become a lot more mainstream in terms of like ICOs are doing like legitimate marketing. They're spending a lot of money in order to promote their product, in order to raise funds. There's like a much larger market for them to market to, because the demand for cryptocurrency, or just the general just like in general, people holding cryptocurrency looking to invest in ICOs or speculate in whatever coins, has gone up like astronomically in the past year to 1.5 years. So it started out in a way where ICOs didn't have to do any marketing. Like you would learn about projects by, or for me, I would learn about projects by logging on to Bitcoin Talk every day, looking at the announcements thread, like see what posts there are. So that's obviously gonna make it much more difficult in the past for projects to raise money. So like an example of a project, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like I can't think of a good one off the top of my head, but like if you look at like the projects in like early to middle 2016 that were looking to raise funds, they set their hard caps at maybe between like 5 and 10 million, and a lot of times they raised under $1 million. For similar quality projects that come out now would likely easily raise like 30, 40 million. So the market has evolved in a sense that there's a lot more demand and there's a lot more money to be made for any company or any project to ICO. And then in turn, obviously, because there is so much more demand for whatever ICO projects from new cryptocurrency adopters that don't particularly understand the concept of an ICO or coins, there's obviously going to be a lot more scams, right? So I think ICOs are in a state right now where I'd say maybe 80 to 90% of the good projects like within the cryptocurrency space that have like legitimate reason to ICO, a legitimate reason to raise funds, have already done so. And the number of like reasonable projects or good ICOs among like the entire pool of everyone that is ICOing is becoming smaller and smaller. And in my opinion, I think the market will probably die out in the next 6 to 12 months, where essentially everyone working in the space or every single ICO project, cryptocurrency project that needs to raise funds via ICO will have done so already, and the remainder of the market would be like completely diluted with either scams or lower quality projects. And obviously there's going to be a few exceptions, but in general, I think that's where it's going.
I saw an interesting infographic that showed the profitability of ICOs by month over the last year or so. And it directly, the overall profitability decreases every month because the total amount of ICOs is always increasing. And the amount of projects that are just straight up scams, or really just like extremely ambitious and never going to be achieved, is just increasing all of the time. And so you have to be more and more aware of what you are investing in. And then that's kind of on one side of it. And then the other side of it, because of the opportunity for people to make money, a much larger percentage of those allocations are going to funds rather than to people. So, I mean, I could definitely see things looking a lot different than even how they look today. Another interesting point about it too, I think, is that really Ethereum kind of opened the door there in two different ways. First off, it kind of showed people how much money that you really could make through ICOs, and then also just the ability to use ERC20s on the Ethereum network really was a game changer for people to be able to do it easily, and for exchanges to be able to offer these tokens easily. I think that also played a large role in the development of the market. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's just like so easy right now to issue an ERC20 token or an ERC223 standard token. Like I can issue Doug token within like an hour and distribute it like how I please. So in turn, it means that I guess I should clarify one thing about ICO specifically. You brought up a statistic about like, the profitability of, ICOs are going down over time. A lot of the time, I'd say the value of the token post ICO on exchanges is almost not related to the project at all. It's mostly related to this specific market factors, exchange listings, market making, buy demand post ICO. So the other thing though is when companies or when projects issue tokens, the tokens don't necessarily reflect any value or any equity within the project itself, right? So like, for example, if a project is developing like a new type of blockchain where eventually down the road, they might sell the intellectual property of that to, say, like a major corporation. Specifically for token holders, unless it's a security token, they don't reap any direct benefits from that company doing well. So, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there. What was the question?
Well, you were trying to point something out, I believe. but actually, so while we're talking about security tokens, that's another question that I want to ask here today. So I think we've seen most projects try and be like, hey, we're a utility token, because the laws surrounding being a utility token are very different than being a security. Once you're a security token, then you have to register with the SEC, and we've seen most operations try and claim to be utility token, kind of regardless of what they truly are. And then, in a meeting a couple of months ago, or in a hearing with the Senate, the chairman of the SEC said, like, we really believe these are securities. So What are your thoughts on the current, security versus utility arguments as to what these tokens truly are?
So I think right now there isn't exactly a clear definition in terms of what is and what isn't a security, specifically related to cryptocurrencies. I also think that a majority, if not all, of Ethereum and Ethereum-based tokens, or like Neo-based tokens, are likely securities, especially ones that have that have been sold.
Rights?
What's that? Sorry, what'd you say?
Voting rights, especially ones with voting rights.
No, I was going to say, especially ones that have been issued in the past where the regulation wasn't as clear, or the cryptocurrency wasn't as big, so like regulators didn't care as much because they issued like a token and they outlined like a roadmap, and they essentially insinuated that like investment or purchasing the token would be investment like within their project, and like a roadmap or a developmental map essentially constitutes saying that the value of the company or the value of the project will rise over time. Hence, the value of the token will rise over time, which is like their selling point for investment, which would definitely categorize those tokens as a security. I think now, because there's a more fear of regulation, and because there's so much more money in the markets, a lot of these projects are hiring top-notch lawyers who are giving very good legal advice as to how to at least attempt to issue a token as a utility token versus as a security. So the more recent projects, I think, are more likely to be compliant with further SEC regulation, or whatever governing body is regulating, because they're working directly with the regulators. But if you look at the projects from like 2016, let's say, like there wasn't this like looming fear of SEC regulation coming down on any of these projects, just because like the space was a lot smaller, the market was a lot smaller, they were raising a lot less money. It basically wasn't worth it wasn't worth pursuing. But now that it is, I think, I'm not sure if this is correct, but I think in the future you'll see the SEC going after a lot of the past projects that, in my opinion, clearly violate security laws.
Yeah, it's interesting when you realize they're not allowed to even post a roadmap. It's like, well, then why are people buying this? There's not even like a clear outline for what you're going to be doing. It's actually like you are handcuffed severely if you're deemed to be a security token.
Yeah, it's sort of like a double-edged sword, because you want to promote your project, you want to promote the eventual use of your technology, and but like there's restrictions on saying certain things that would insinuate that the value of the token is tied to the future value of the project, and if you're promoting that, or you're talking about that, it insinuates that the value will increase, therefore the token price will increase. Yeah, so it's kind of weird, right? Like you're selling, you really are, if you're a project ICO, you really are selling your token. You're selling your token to people who think that in the future the token will be worth a lot more, and that's like 99% of the ICO market, right? Like people buying ICOs, getting issued a token, and thinking in the future they'll be able to redeem their token or the token that they're given at a higher price than they paid for it. So like not being able to advertise that, or like sort of side saddling your way. I don't know if side saddling is the right word, but
that's a sore subject around here.
But it's just sort of like moving your way through the murky rules of what is and what isn't a security is. I think in the coming month it's going to get kind of ridiculous in terms of if regulation is coming, what projects they go after, what what the SEC determines to be a security token. I was reading earlier that they're actually looking at Ethereum right now, saying Ethereum possibly could be a security token, which, I mean, by any vague definition, I'd say 90 to 95% of like the coins listed on like the first few pages of CoinMarketCap could be considered security tokens. So who knows? We'll see what happens.
I mean, if Ethereum is a security, then I feel the vast majority of the current cryptocurrencies that have ICO'd, or any cryptocurrency that has ICO'd, are going to also be considered securities. So then the question sort of just becomes like, how many of these can they even reasonably go after? Especially when it's a decentralized currency, how and who do you go after for some of these specifically, right?
So I think what's going to happen is they're going to start going after the ones that use very speculative marketing techniques. I think they're going after, or they went after Centra, a credit card based, crypto credit card based platform that I forgot who they used. I think they hired Floyd Mayweather to promote their coin. And then it turned out that they had no active relationship with any like MasterCard, Visa, any credit card provider. I know Paragon, I believe that's the name. It's some ICO run by like this model and what's his name? The Game, the rapper. I'm pretty sure they're going to get in trouble with the SEC. So I'd say like the most likely thing that's going to happen is the projects with like very speculative marketing techniques in order to get investors, specifically like hiring athletes, hiring celebrities that probably know like absolutely nothing about the market or nothing about the project in order to, you know, raise more funds. I feel like those are the projects the SEC will go after first. But who knows, eventually they might go after like the more legitimate projects that if they're raising funds and they're violating securities laws, you know, like anything can happen.
I think that it's downright offensive that you think that Floyd Mayweather is not in tune with what's going on in the ICO market. You have no facts to base that off of. I honestly, I expected more from you.
I mean, he can't even read, right?
Maybe that's what he wants you to think. I don't know. He can fight though. I'll tell you that he can fight. Yeah. I mean, like it seems like I think the most prominent, you know, people that are engaging in some of this very speculative activity, as well as the larger entities using aggressive marketing, will certainly be the first, you know, the first groups of people that the SEC does go after. But again, like there are just so many, it's really going to be interesting to see like how far they can go with that. Because if you're going to go after really anyone who, you know, in your eyes, basically promoted the increase of value of their token, that is going to be essentially like the entire ICO market. So definitely.
Well, okay, so I think they're going to go for the projects that are sort of abandoned, or, you know, like the developers aren't like actively developing the platform or the DApp or whatever the project is for. Because like a lot of ICOs, what happens is that they have like a one-time fundraise, which essentially is supposed to fund the company until, you know, their product is in the market, or like they can like monetize their product in some way. And a lot of these projects, that they see the money that they get in that one-time fundraise, and it's just over for them. They have like no financial incentive to continue working on their project, or to, you know, continue developing their product. So I think the SEC specifically will go after those projects first, the ones that like, I guess what you'd call them is like white paper only. A white paper is just like a semi-technical paper that describes the scope of the project, like what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish. So it's easy for anyone to like write and develop a white paper, but it's also important to, you know, execute the plan, or like actually develop the product that you're talking about within that paper, which I think quite a few ICOs essentially aren't doing. Like if you look at if you look at some of these projects, like Some of them have public GitHub repositories, and they're just like not being updated. It just shows that like no one's actually working on these projects.
Yeah, that's a huge problem because the incentive structure isn't in line with what everyone's goals are. And I would say in general, from just my business stance, is to try and align the incentives to everyone involved, because then stuff actually does get done. I actually talked with an interesting project that was looking to try and essentially decentralize the process for ICO fundraising, where you invest money and then receive voting rights based on milestones that have been hit. And like, so essentially, like, if people are just like fucking off with your money, you could basically return whatever portion hasn't yet been unlocked for them to use. I mean, I didn't end up investing in it, but I thought that idea at least was a cool attempt at a solution to try and fix this problem. What do you think can be done to fix that? Or do you think that this is just part of the way that a free market works, and that, eventually people are going to get scammed enough to where they're going to stop doing this?
So specifically with that idea, I don't think it would ever work, only because so for example, if I issue an ICO token and I sell it, I distribute it, and then let's say within like 2 to 3 months, it's going to hit an exchange. So the developmental roadmap's probably, like years down the line. So maybe you have like cliffs of, let's say 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, where you have like a specific voting structure for the tokens. People that own the tokens would just be voting based on the market price of the tokens rather than the development of the project at that point, right? Because if the ICO is underwater, then they would obviously vote to have their money refunded, regardless of if everyone's just fucking around or if everyone's actually working on the project. What was the second part of your question?
Well, so the second part of my question was, I was asking you what you thought needs to happen to sort of rectify the amount of what you mentioned earlier happening in the marketplace, where people basically, write a white paper and then that's it. GG, give me like 100 million. I'll see you guys later. What do you think can be done to fix that problem?
Well, I think what's going to happen is a lot of consumer confidence or investor confidence is going to be lost once like all these projects hit the market and are like almost always underwater or turn out to be scams, right? So the problem is that there's so much like newfound hype for cryptocurrency, and there's so many new people entering the ICO market looking for essentially quick free money, right? Like people want to invest in projects. Most people don't care about the technology, don't understand the technology, don't understand like the actual value of the token or what the token represents. All they see is just like the token costs this amount, and they're essentially speculating on the value of the token going up on exchanges. I don't think there can actually be anything done because of the whole nature of the beast, right? Because most ICOs, even like lower quality ICOs, raise ridiculous amounts of money for the inherent value of what they're doing. There's just going to be more and more people like looking to capitalize on this until the entire market dies. So I think the eventual solution is that there just becomes a tipping point where the entire ICO landscape is almost entirely bad projects or complete scams, and then investor confidence will fall to like next to nothing, and the market will bottom out.
I think as a counterpoint to that, though, there will continue to be good ideas and smart people trying to develop them. So as that happens, how will those people raise money if they're not able to ICO?
Okay, so like what's going on now with all the high quality ICOs in terms of projects with like solid development teams is, I'd say a majority of them are sold privately. Selling ICOs privately versus publicly, I believe it's sort of, how would I describe this? you run into like a lot less legal issues in the future. If you're like, for example, if you're running like a public marketing campaign, you're selling to anyone that was willing to contribute money. A lot of the times, like these ICOs run like a very small limited KYC, if KYC at all. So I think those projects specifically are going to have or be at risk for legal action against them. So there's like high incentive to, if you can sell your ICO project privately, you do that. The other benefit that good projects have right now is that they have access to strategic investors rather than just the general public. So if I was a decent project, I'd rather sell my token or raise funds from people that would in the future help my project grow, help me build partnerships, help me do whatever, rather than just like just random people that want to contribute to your project because they're speculating on the price of your token. So because like the market's so big right now and there's so few, there's so much demand for good ICO projects, and there's just like crypto funds popping up everywhere. It seems to me though, like in the future, the reason I'm like mostly pessimistic about the ICO market is that there's just going to be more and more and more public ICOs that are going to be shittier and shittier projects. So like, for example, if the number of ICOs in total volume increases in the next like 6 to 9 months, but there's less and less good projects, and of those good projects, a majority of the good projects will have contacts within the industry, will be able to sell out to funds, will be able to sell out to strategic investors. The general public will be getting, like the very bottom of all ICOs just because of how the market works.
So you're more worried about the public's, or rather, when you're talking about the state of the ICO market essentially, evaporating, you're talking about for public investors.
Yeah, in a general sense, yes, but I also think that like the market as a whole will be evaporating. I think the issue with the public though is like a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money in the next like 6 to 12 months, and there's going to be a lot of fallout from that. Where I think like if we talk about ICOs within like a year and a half from now, there's going to be a fairly large negative stigma. If we look back on like the projects that are ICOing like late 2017, early 2018, when like when the total crypto market cap went sort of crazy, and like a ton of new money came in, and people were firing left and right at like whatever projects just because they wanted to get into the space, and like fear of missing out, whatever you want to call it. So like a lot of those projects aren't going to be around within, I'd say, like a year from now, and you're going to have like a bunch of people that were speculating on the token be upset about that, and like the entire ICO market or the entire ICO process as a whole is going to have a lot more negative stigma than it does right now.
Interesting phrase to reference there, because we've had a guy in the chat here whose screen name is JFOMO. So It was almost like a shout out to him there. Shout out to JFOMO. Thanks everyone for tuning in today, by the way. If you are, you hit that thumbs up button, show some love for the late night podcast stream. Okay, let's change topics a little bit here. A lot of insightful information there for sure. Let's talk about something that's a little closer to home for both of us. Let's talk about some of these poker sites that we've seen over the last year or so kind of emerge, or rather they're in the process of emerging. You see Virtue Poker, Coin Poker. I think I saw some other Kryptonia. I don't know, some other poker site. I'm sure there are more. I've talked to more of them. I know Breakout Gaming was trying to do some token. There are essentially a probably 5 or 10 or more of these things going on. But let's talk about some of the bigger ones. I know you've had some negative opinions about the way that they're operating. I share some of those viewpoints across the board. But why don't you go ahead and kick it off with what your general thoughts on the use of cryptocurrency to solve some of the issues we've seen with online poker in the past?
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit eye-opening to me in terms of like how little I know about other industries in terms of specific ICO project or specific cryptocurrency projects that are working in other industries, because I talk to people that like are in the cryptocurrency space that know nothing about poker, and they like don't seem to understand like poker as a business, how it works. And it makes me think that like I don't understand, supply chains as a business, or I can't think of another example, but it's like
specifically,
like like all these various ICOs that are like are targeting a very niche market with their product. It makes me think that like I have no clue what I'm doing in all these other spaces, because I understand the poker business fairly well, and I realize that like everyone I talk to within the crypto space has no clue how poker specifically operates. So the main issue I think with all these crypto poker products is the narrative that they all want to sell is that there's like a lot of scams. A lot of these sites are fraudulent. The random number generators can't be verified. It's better to hold your own funds rather than having like a central body or a central poker site hold your funds. Like, I mean, in my opinion, and probably in the opinion of like a majority of poker players, none of those things are real issues, right? Like all the major sites, when they get their gaming licenses, they have to have a third party audit their RNG. So even though it's not blockchain based, like all the sites are provably fair. If you look at the white papers of a lot of these poker products, what they're saying is that there's a tons of sites that like went under, that have stolen player funds, but in reality, there hasn't been like a large scale loss of player funds in years, I don't think, right? Like all the major sites are legitimate businesses now. They all segregate player funds from, or hopefully they segregate player funds from their actual business. But I think the main problem with these poker products is their solution to storage of player funds and being able to hold onto your own private keys, hold onto your own money, is that they're issuing a token that isn't redeemable. Meaning, I gave the example of, like, for example, a site like PokerStars. Yeah, if they issued, say, play money chips and sold them but didn't buy them back, but allowed you to hold on to the play money chips, it's not necessarily solving the problem of central controlled funds. The other thing is like players like playing on a poker network shouldn't rely on other players for liquidity, or like eventually the entire system will fall down. And what that means is like all these poker products that have native tokens that aren't liquid because their only use case is for playing poker on this platform. The way you exchange them is you go to a third-party exchange and you sell them to people, but there needs to be buy demand or buy volume, meaning that there needs to be someone down the line that also wants to use the platform to play that doesn't already hold the chip. So eventually, when everyone that's playing already holds the chip, or no one's using the platform, the value of the token will just go to zero, right? So the other thing is, this is true for a lot of ICO projects, but specifically in poker, there's no reason why a decentralized poker platform can't run on a more liquid token. Like, for example, we can just play poker with Bitcoin, right? There's no reason for any of these projects to issue their own token other than to raise funds via an ICO. And like, in my opinion, they're actually doing a disservice to their players by doing this, because, like, for example, if they just ran a platform where you can play with Bitcoin, you can play with Ethereum, you can play with, like a high market cap coin, then it solves the entire liquidity issue of relying on other players to provide liquidity to the network, right? Because there's like infinite use cases for Bitcoin outside of playing poker on this one site. Meaning, like, if you buy and sell, if you buy and sell Bitcoin every time you cash in and cash out, the market's just not going to die because there's no action on the side, or because there's no liquidity provided by other players. But so like the disservice is like they're issuing a token and forcing players on the network to play with that token, which means that, like, if the only use case for the token is, playing poker on this one website, and people stop playing poker on the site, then obviously tokens are worth nothing versus, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, whatever.
Right. That all makes sense. A couple things there. So for starters, talking about the number of player deposits that have been lost, I think that the way that you phrased it was, or people say that a lot of sites have gone down. And that might be true. There are probably many sites that have gone down. But in terms of the total number of player deposits that have been lost is actually quite low, because when you think about the amount of deposits that are handled by the top 5, 10, 15 sites, it's massive. And those sites have been relatively reliable for some time. I think the only exception there that I can think of would be the American sites that are operating in, they say gray market. I'm going to go ahead and just call it a black market after what happened on Black Friday. Maybe it's a fitting term. I think maybe particularly in those instances, having some security can make some sense. But outside of that, I just can't really see a very good reason, or rather a very strong reason, to protect yourself against the site taking your money, because these are businesses that are heavily incentivized for you to be able to get your money, for you to be able to have a fair playing experience. That's how they build, that's how they grow, that's how they continue to make millions of dollars in revenue. Online poker is roughly, I'm going to just ballpark, but let's call it a $2 to $3 billion a year online industry. They're incentivized to continue to have a gaming license, or else they don't have a business. So, I think on that side, that makes perfect sense. And then also, one thing that I think gets talked about a ton from different virtue poker, I think coin poker to some extent, but basically they talk about how you're getting a fair deal, right? And that is something that no online poker player that got any shot of winning money playing poker is worried about. There is no incentive for the sites to screw you over and put an ace out a few extra times when you got the kings. Like, that's not a thing, and that's not something that really needs to be solved. It feels a little bit like, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so it's just like, oh, crypto's hot, let's do crypto poker. When
Exactly.
Why on earth should you use your own token? There are two questions that are just never answered when I talk to these projects ever. First off, why your own token? And second off,
well, it's obvious why their own token. Like, they can't raise funds without it, right? So yeah, you have to issue your own token, or you lose out on millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, but that's not a good reason.
I think it's, obviously, but like they're not going to say that. But like, in reality, that is the reason, right? The reason they issue their own token is because they can sell their token and keep the money that they sell the token for. So like I read through like these crypto poker white papers, or these crypto poker project ideas, and at the beginning of every one, it outlines like what is currently plaguing the online poker industry. And like, being a part of the online poker industry, I read through this stuff and I'm like, none of these things are actual issues that like plague the industry right now. It's just like a false narrative they're trying to create in order to build something that's completely unnecessary. I will mention there's another issue with all these poker products building like player pools from the ground up. Is and in terms of online poker, the reason it's dried up, and the main issue, is that there's too many professionals, there's too many bots, there's too many like good players online, where the recreational players, or like the losing players, who we call fish, are going to lose their money. They're going to lose their money quicker, and they're going to have like a less enjoyable playing experience, which means they're less likely to deposit more money and in order to and play more in order to keep the entire poker ecosystem alive. This is especially bad for cryptocurrency based poker sites because they don't even have access to a majority, if not all, of the recreational player market. Like if you think about it, like the demographic of people that play poker recreationally and lose money online don't care about cryptocurrency. They're not technologically advanced. They're not going to jump through hurdles to, you know, purchase Ethereum, purchase Bitcoin, go to like a third-party exchange that like is unregulated in order to buy these tokens, like figure out how to like set market orders in an illiquid market, and then transfer the tokens to your balance to play on this brand new site which isn't regulated.
Right,
it's just not going to happen, right?
You're driving it like this is actually the second point I was going to make here. The second point that no one has had a good answer for is how are you going to overcome the barrier to entry? Because that's going to be a huge problem trying to figure out how to get the most people on your site. You want to make it as easy as possible. And the more hoops they have to jump through to get onto your site, you know, look, man, like I've seen some data when it comes to marketing and click-through rates. And even if like, if like the box is in the wrong spot or something pops up or whatever, you lose like 30 or 50% of the people from the first click. And you're like, okay, well, it's simple. First, you got your credit card, and then you go to Coinbase, and you wait 2 weeks, and then you get your Bitcoin. You know, it's like what are people supposed to
do? And then you deposit on like IDEX or HitBTC. You have to register an account there. That they will possibly like not credit your deposit, and their support maybe takes like a month to respond. It's just like, and then like the education factor in terms of educating them, not about like crypto poker, but just like cryptocurrency in general. Like I'd say like a majority, if not, like a majority of recreational players don't understand cryptocurrency in a way that they're comfortable even playing on a cryptocurrency site. And the issues that these cryptocurrency projects are attempting to outline as, you know, like the main difference between them and like a centrally controlled non-blockchain poker product, they just don't care about, right? They don't care about the RNG being provably fair on a blockchain ledger. They don't care about like holding your own private keys. In fact, I'd say a majority of them like probably wouldn't even want to hold on to their own private keys because of like fear of them fucking up or losing. They would trust like a central authority more to, you know, like every time you log on and see your Poker Stars balance or your Party Poker balance, it's there. Like you don't like lose your private key and then you have to like, it's just like for like the older generation of, you know, poker players that are recreational pokers, it's just like impossible barrier to entry. So like these sites will never be that profitable, or they won't have that much action because the younger generation, or like, you know, our generation of poker players that like understand cryptocurrency, like have no problem you know, acquiring cryptocurrency in order to play on these poker sites. What we're looking for isn't, you know, any of this stuff either. What we're looking for is where the best games are, right? So I'm going to play like on a shadier site that can possibly will hold my money and may or may not steal my money, versus, you know, a site with no action if I'm a professional player, right? Because like
it depends on how likely you think they are to steal your money.
Yeah, sure.
There's an EV calc there that you have to solve and decide, but obviously if a site has no action and terrible games, then no one's going to want to play there as a professional player. So yeah, they're going to struggle to get action probably on both sides of it.
Yeah, I just don't see how they could possibly get a recreational player pool base that would, you know, fuel the entire poker ecosystem. So it's likely just going to be a bunch of like cryptocurrency token holders who like may or may not be into poker. Some will play occasionally, but other than that, there isn't going to be like a sustained ecosystem ever on any of these sites.
So changing gear, well, similar topic here. What's your thought about the overall poker landscape? Because we've seen for the last few years I know a lot of you guys listen for cryptocurrency, but this is a subject that I think JMO and I both know a lot about coming from poker. But I think for the last few years, we've seen the giant of the industry, PokerStars, take some hits in some areas where, I think other companies are trying to smell blood in the water. We've seen Party Poker take a lot of steps to kind of to grow their brand. What do you see as far as what that landscape looks down the road? And do you think that there's an opportunity for competitors to step in and have some success? I think that that's another reason why we're seeing cryptocurrency projects, is because people realize that there is a distaste for stars in the industry right now because of the way that they've treated their customers.
Yeah, so I would say like the biggest gainer in the past few years are these privately run games that are essentially settled on credit rather than having a central operator, just because a lot of the market for recreational players, especially in like I'd say third world countries or underdeveloped countries where there's like a lot of people that are unbanked or don't have the proper financial tools to be able to handle the payment processing from deposits and withdrawals. Instead, they deal with like junkets or agents that they play on credit, or they put a deposit with them. So I would say that a lot of the poker action that was previously on the major sites, PokerStars, Party Poker, like the iPoker Network or whatever, has moved into those games because agents themselves are incentivized to keep these games running because they're making a lot on rake and a lot on specifically like all the players playing in their games, and then like all the professionals are incentivized to play these games because they're substantially softer, meaning like as a professional you're going to make a lot more money playing these games than you are going to be playing like on a more mainstream site. So I think for professional players, sites like PokerStars, Party Poker, and every other poker network that is connected to say like a sports book or like a major gambling institution, the action will decline only because, like right now, for example, if you're like a casual sports bettor and you have like X amount of money in your sportsman account that's also linked to your poker account, if you deposit money into your poker account and play there, you're likely going to lose your money much faster than you would say like 2 or 3 years ago, right? Because the overall toughness of the games, the overall like professionals work like 12 hours a day studying the game. They have like insane mathematical tools that they didn't have years ago. Like there's like a proliferation of bots that are essentially unbeatable, like playing optimal poker. So you're gonna have like a lot worse experience just like casually gambling on poker as a whole. So like I think eventually the online market where a lot of the poker action is driven from, say, like the whales in the sports book or the whales gambling at the casino, like moving over to poker, that will be on the decline. I think though that in specifically some countries, especially the Asian countries, I'd say like China, India, Southeast Asian countries, there's an increase in the number of people wanting to play poker, and I guess the overall skill level or the overall development of the game in those countries is a lot lower than the rest of the world, which makes it lucrative for professionals to be able to interact with these player pools or be able to play in player pools that include these players. So I think going forward, that's where the real market is, whether you're a poker operator or you're a poker player, because a poker operator just needs to, generate a liquidity pool of players to play under them. And the way these liquidity pools form is recreational players have to play before professionals get in there, because if it's all professionals, then it becomes less and less lucrative and the games will slowly disappear.
We've definitely seen the rise of some of the apps that people play on. And we've also seen more and more, or rather, I guess I should say less and less, the high stakes games run across these sites. So I do think that it's a bit of an inevitability that over time online poker takes a hit just because there's really no way to actually remove people from being able to use bots as they become stronger. You can do your best to try and avoid it or to try and remove it, and sites should take steps that they can to prevent it. But you can really only do so much if people are running something on an external machine or like inputting it from something else. Like you're only able to protect players to some extent, which I do think is particularly bad for the high stakes economy. You just can't take a shot that someone you're playing at very high stakes has a bot and is going to beat you. You just can't risk that. So I think that that's kind of going to be a problem for online poker, sort of no matter what.
Yeah, I was going to say if there is success in poker in terms of like a cryptocurrency poker product, it needs to have a few things. So first, it needs to have it can't build like a player pool or a liquidity pool from the ground up. It needs to have access to like a pre-existing player pool or pre-existing liquidity pool. And the only real use case I see for a token or a blockchain-based poker product is if this specific player pool has issues with traditional payment processing, like traditional banking, where either they're charged quite a bit for like foreign transaction fees, or like deposit withdrawal fees, or if their country has some sort of taxation where like withdrawals from a site are immediately taxed. I believe like a few of the European countries have that, right? Like if you withdraw from a poker site, they withhold like 20 to 30% of your withdrawal, and it's just considered tax. So
Yeah, I want to say Denmark does that. I think maybe the Netherlands does that. Could be wrong about that one, but yeah, there are a few countries in Europe that do that.
yeah, so it makes sense to me to set something up if you have access to a player pool like that already and build a platform around that. But like, I don't agree with basically any of the poker products right now, essentially selling the narrative that, this is like cool new blockchain technology where like we can do stuff that we've been doing for like the past 5 years, or the past like no more than 5 years, for the past like 10 to 15 years.
It's certainly not anything too innovative, and most of the tokens just simply don't make much sense. What are your thoughts on how many poker players seem to have moved from poker into crypto? Because I think about it, for us at least, we got involved several years ago now. I mean, I think I first bought Bitcoin in 2013. And I think a lot of our friends did as well. We were lucky to kind of get in at an early point, I think, relative to what a lot of other people did. But I would say over the last year or two, we've seen a surge of the poker community moving over into the cryptocurrency community. And one thing that I found to be really funny about that is that it creates this extremely polarized view of cryptocurrency in the poker community. There are basically, look, okay, if you've played poker in the last 2 years, you've heard someone at the table talking about cryptocurrency. I'm going to say 50 times. Okay. It's nonstop all the time what people are talking about. And so I think most poker players end up having to make a pretty, a pretty clear, they have to take a pretty clear stance on what they think about it. And so that either means they're buying or they're not. And so what I've seen a lot of people, especially on my social medias, as I've changed gears a bit in terms of where I create content, all people are like, oh, goddamn Bitcoin, like shut the fuck up. If I hear Monero again, I will punch you in the face. And that's the Verge fans. But basically I've seen this real transformation of a lot of our community from poker into crypto. And now a lot of people aren't even playing poker anymore. They're generally more involved in this space. Why do you think so many of us moved over into cryptocurrency from poker?
So it was sort of about what I was talking about earlier. The current environment is fairly toxic in terms of being a professional poker player. Like, you're dealing with a lot more than you are now. The amount of money you can make as a high level player is a lot less, like substantially less than what you'd be making like 2-3 years ago, right? Like, you're making like fractions upon what you were making back then, and it's becoming like increasingly difficult. So like, I think people have realized that they're sort of stuck in like in a job or a profession with diminishing returns, right? Like every year, no matter how good you are at poker, every year you play poker, you're going to be making less and less money, and that's just like the nature of poker overall. So specifically the cryptocurrency, like I think a lot of the poker community moved to cryptocurrency because that they saw an outlet to stop playing poker and to make money elsewhere. And I'd say like a majority of the people that are like extreme haters on cryptocurrency, like specifically within poker, that call it like a Ponzi or a scam. I'd say a majority of them are likely a bit salty that they missed out on some gains in terms of like speculating on cryptocurrency earlier. Yeah, for me, I've been like interested in cryptocurrency since, I don't know, 2014, 2015. Like I've talked with you, I've talked with like all our close friends about cryptocurrency like years and years ago. So it's nothing new for me, but like as like the markets have been taking off, as like it's gaining more mainstream adoption, I'd say more and more poker people are moving over to like speculating on various coins rather than actually playing poker. I actually remember like back in the day when like right after the Ethereum ICO, I was telling Ryan Fee about Ethereum, and it was like Ethereum was like 70 cents at the time. And I told him like you should buy some. It could go up to $10, and I think he bought a bunch like at like around $1 and then sold it all like $4. It's like I forex my money, I'm out.
You want to also remember that story, Mo? I remember being part of some chat we were in, and I was like, "Look, I'm way late to the game on Ethereum. Like, I don't know, like it's $10 right now. Like, what should I do?" And you're like, "It's pretty overpriced at 10." I remember that comment. I was like, "All right, I'll avoid it here."
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, like, yeah. But at the time, like $10 was like the Ethereum ICO, I think, was at 30 cents. And when it was released on exchanges, it was maybe double that price. I guess it was pegged to Bitcoin, so it's hard to say like the actual the sale value of Ethereum. And then yeah, so like it's hard to like for me, it's hard to recommend purchasing something that was purchased in the recent past for like fractions, a fraction of the overall price it is, or it was back then. So like it was all relative. I mean, like in retrospect, obviously, Ethereum and the entire cryptocurrency market cap has taken off. But yeah, my bad.
So this is actually kind of interesting to me because I think we got into it around the same time, but I guess I just viewed it as like, a way to have extra liquidity as a player / like the ability to invest in some of the dice sites where you could be the house. So like I guess like I wasn't really like, I didn't really get into it as much because like I really felt like this is going somewhere as like a market. I didn't really see anything close to what's happening today. I sort of just like stumbled my way into it, like making Bitcoin on dice sites and then also enjoying some of the liquidity. But I feel like around the time, so we got in like around similar times, but I feel like from an early stage there, you really believed in it and started to spend a lot of time researching and learning and growing more knowledgeable about it. What made you feel so strongly, or maybe if you did feel strongly, I guess I should rephrase that question as, but what made you want to spend so much of your time focusing on cryptocurrency when it was so much smaller than it is today?
I guess the one thing I like always believed in cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, is its power as a financial tool, as a tool to settle transactions, as a tool to like especially peer-to-peer cash, right? So that specifically solves a lot of the issues that we have in our current financial systems, especially like specifically Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies ignore stuff like political borders. It ignores stuff like financial borders, or like currency conversion. It ignores stuff like, for example, it gives access to the tool itself of Bitcoin gives access to like a bunch of people that are either unbanked or don't have access to traditional financial services that you and I have. So I always thought of the technology being revolutionary in that sense. I think it's devolved to something much different than it was back then today, just because there's just so many new like blockchain 2.0, blockchain 3.0 projects. Like people are building a bunch of decentralized applications, and it's sort of gone away from that. Although obviously still like there's Bitcoin Cash, like all the high market cap coins are essentially peer-to-peer or electronic cash still. But yeah, that's what's like always interested me. So like initially when I actually got into Bitcoin, what happened was I think this was in like 2013 or 2014. I used to do some NFL sports betting, and the way it worked is there's a poker forum called 2+2, which is like where it's essentially the Bitcoin talk of poker, where before poker was mainstream, like poker players like got together and talked on 2+2. So like I was fairly active in that community, and in order to, a lot of the poker players that were on 2+2 were also like into sports betting and stuff like that. So instead of saying me depositing money onto an actual sports book, I would just make bets with them. So we would have like our own thread within the 2+2 forums where like you would need to be like a reputable member of the community, or you need someone to guarantee your bets. But eventually it's just like all the same people like betting with each other. So in 2013, I forgot his name, but this is someone who is very active in that thread, built a platform where instead of like betting on the thread via like PM on like a VBB forum, I think that's what it's called. You just like went to this third-party site and you can see like which people like on the forum wanted which sides of the bets, and all the transactions were settled in Bitcoin rather than like having to deal with like a PayPal transfer or a bank transfer or whatever. So I actually bought quite a bit of Bitcoin back then when Bitcoin was, I want to say, it was under $100 for sure. It was like $20 or $30.
That's 2000. That's late 2012, early 2013.
Yeah. Okay. And then after NFL season, I ended up like selling a majority of my Bitcoin, if not all of it, just because I was only using Bitcoin as like a transactional settlement mechanism to gamble on sports. And like once NFL season was over and there was like a hiatus on like the sports I was gambling, I saw no real intrinsic value for me to hold this. But at the time, I didn't really understand Bitcoin at all. It was just introduced to me by this sports betting site. And then I'd say later that year, I think this was when Steals with Clubs and there was another major poker site that came about that ran exclusively on Bitcoin, and the action there was actually quite good. And this was around when it was more difficult to like deposit money and play as an American on most major poker sites. I know like you and I, what we did was we moved out of the country. We set up residency in Canada or Mexico or whatever, and we handled our business there. But I feel like at the time, if you were a poker player within the U.S. and you were like a more recreational player, but you still wanted to play poker, you were severely limited in like the regulated sites you could play to due to the UIGEA. So I think like a decent amount of the action came from that, where people sort of discovered Bitcoin on accident because they saw like a new site that was accepting of U.S. players. I wouldn't say accepting, but like they were indifferent because they didn't run any deposits and withdrawals through any American financial systems. So like if you're an American, you couldn't deposit from your bank account onto like most poker sites, but you could buy a Bitcoin, deposit Bitcoin onto, say, Seals Clubs and play. So that's initially how I like built up like a Bitcoin roll, was playing poker on these sites.
Worked out for the best.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, for those of you who have just tuned in since 2013, Bitcoin is no longer worth $30. Welcome to the podcast. By the way, you're in the right place to learn. Anyway, so yeah, it's interesting how it started off like that, and then it kind of started to become clear that it was also an investment vehicle as we went along. I actually remember this vividly. It was 2013. And you had the price, like the live ticker Bitcoin price, and it was price up. And it was when the Chinese were just buying up Bitcoin right before they banned it. And you were looking at it and you looked at me and you're like, I am swinging absurd amounts of money right now. It was like Bitcoin was like 1,000 back then. It was like not even anywhere close to what it was today. It's still kind of crazy that we had that happen, and then such a long period of time where it just remained relatively stable. 2014 to 16 were, not very volatile for Bitcoin, right? And then now I feel like we have all of these new people in the space that, particularly the people that got involved in the last few months, who are like, oh, this is the end of the world. Like Bitcoin's like done. Like, oh, it's like crashed down to 6K. It's like, guys, like Bitcoin was at 1K a year ago. It's like people seem to forget so quickly.
Yeah, I think what happened at the time was a lot of confidence was lost within cryptocurrency because there was a lot of bad actors in the space. Like the most notable is obviously Mt. Gox. They lost an insane amount of Bitcoin in terms of like the overall circulating supply, because it was the exchange like back in the day. There wasn't like a Bitfinex, there wasn't a Binance, there wasn't like competition or much competition in the market. I'd say, I don't know if this is just off the top of my head, but I think Mt. Gox at one point accounted for like well over 50% of like the daily transactional volume of Bitcoin. So for that site to go down, and the other thing is like hardware wallets were less of a thing back in the day. People would use either like the blockchain.info web wallet, or they would use like a software wallet mostly. So it was more of a thing to keep like large sums of cryptocurrency on sites where you don't control the private keys, because it was more of a hassle, especially if you're like not technically astute to handle your own private keys than it is now. Like now it's fairly easy, and I think in the future it's going to get like easier and easier, where like people will start using Bitcoin without even knowing that they're using Bitcoin, or like it'll just be seamless within day-to-day life.
Well, the closer we get to that, the easier it will be for Bitcoin to succeed.
Yeah, but I think that was a major like benchmark in the whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency market, where you lost a lot of people like that have lost their entire Bitcoin rolls. I don't know like what percentage of funds have been recovered since then, but yeah, you just lost out on a bunch of people. You lost out on a bunch of confidence, and then I'm sure that's why the price was stagnant for like a few years. And it wasn't just Mt. Gox. There was like Cryptsy, the Bitfinex hack, although that was more recent, and they sort of I feel like in that situation they did their best in order to rectify it, unlike the Mt. Gox situation. But yeah, I think going forward, as long as these catastrophe black swan events happening to major exchanges becomes less and less of a thing as more money goes into the space. They have better security, the better technology to maintain their site and not lose user funds. It'll slowly gain more and more traction as people will see it as like a legitimate way to store value.
It's a two-sided problem, because on one side you have, I guess it's really negligence either way. But on one side, you have sites just acting unethically or stealing the money, or you have to worry about people within the company. And then there's also the side that, this is a very technologically advanced area where there are people who, if they can figure out how to hack in and steal your money, stand to make absurdly large amounts of money, kind of anonymously or pseudo anonymously on the internet. So, the security of funds is a huge issue. And Mount Gox being the biggest example of how easy things can go awry. And when one player constitutes such a large portion of the entire market, then you're going to see some extremely negative effects on the market when they go under. One of the great things about the fact that we have such, parity, I guess, amongst the bigger exchanges is that should there be a problem somewhere, the majority of funds will still be safe. And while it might hurt the short term, it won't have nearly the same effect that I think the Mount Gox situation did.
Yeah. The other good thing about the current exchange situation is that it's not a situation where one company even has like a commanding lead over any other company in terms of total market share. Like off the top of my head, I think like the biggest exchanges right now are like Binance, OKEX, Whoopee, Bitfinex. And if you look at their daily transactional volume, they're very similar. I think that they're within like maybe like 10 to 20% of each other. In terms of like their overall volume. And obviously there's fluctuation because like all those sites, there's one other one based in Korea, Upbit, I think, that has
BitHum?
Upbit. I think I think BitThumb's a little bit smaller. But yeah, so like there's a bunch of exchanges like in competition with each other that have relatively similar transactional volume. That are attempting to differentiate themselves like in various ways in order to capture more of the market share. So I think that type of competition is really healthy for the cryptocurrency markets overall right now, as opposed to maybe a few years ago, where like a few sites, if not one site, they dominated the entire space and therefore had no real incentive to innovate, make their product better in order to maintain their market share. I think that's actually what happened with Poloniex. Like for a while, Poloniex was by far the biggest exchange, I think, if not up there. And they just had like such a huge market. They had such a huge market share. And I think what happened was like the owners just got like too rich and too lazy and declined to, what are you doing?
So what you're saying here, JMO, if I'm hearing you correctly, is on our crypto monopoly board, we have Bittrex and we've got Binance.
Yeah.
But we should no longer have Poloniex.
No. Yeah. You should get rid of Poloniex. Should be like one of the cheaper.
So like maybe like where Dogecoin is, we could get Poloniex in there.
Yeah. That sounds about right. Although Circle just acquired Poloniex. I actually, this is really funny, but I actually got an email this morning from Poloniex. It's like the first like support email I've gotten in like maybe 2 years, and it was just them announcing that the Dogecoin wallet upgrade was finished on Poloniex, and you could successfully deposit your Dogecoin.
Finally. Look, honestly, years in the making there. You know what? I will not park a single one of my Dogecoin anywhere other than Poloniex from now on.
But yeah, like so the Poloniex user interface is actually pretty good. They just got lazy and they stopped listing new coins. Like most of the coins that are being traded in Poloniex, you see that their the overall transactional volume for them is on the decline, and the exchange obviously is on the decline as a whole. It's interesting though that Circle bought them out, and from what I understand, what they're going to do is they're going to be able to sell security or securitized tokens. They're going to use that platform, the user interface, the back end, in order to sell securities. And they paid like a pretty insane valuation.
400 million, right? 400
yeah, for like an exchange that like probably right now wouldn't register in like the top 10 to 15 exchanges. I could be wrong about that, but
Here's my general take on Poloniex. I feel that they I agree with everything that you said. I think that they became so big that they really felt like that they were going to succeed sort of no matter what, and they stopped focusing on innovation, and that there were hungrier players up and coming that are doing a better job. But I also think that they found themselves in a weird space where they weren't, basically where the masses can buy crypto like a Coinbase. And they also weren't where people who really love a variety of shitcoins can go, where they could buy tons of different shitcoins like Bittrex or Binance. And so they didn't really seem to have like a core like demo of people that these other sites had. And so I think that like as their, uniqueness and really their segment of the market kind of, started to fade, they lost their ability to kind of compete on some of the fronts that they once used to dominate.
Well, I think Poloniex was the spot to go to, like back in the day when you wanted to shitcoin, like when you to like buy and sell shitcoins. It was like it probably had like the largest variety of coins for a while. The main issue is if you look at like their active markets or the markets that they still maintain. I'd say like they stopped listing new coins. I could be wrong about this, but I think they stopped listing new coins somewhere mid last year, and even then they weren't keeping up with like the ICO market where there's tons of projects that are looking to list their tokens on exchanges. So a lot of people that are like newer to cryptocurrency markets, they're probably going to be unfamiliar with a lot of the projects that have tokens listed on Poloniex, which means that there's just like so many players in the space now that are just doing a better job than Poloniex that they're just not competitive with them anymore.
Also, it's an extremely weird move for an exchange to not add new listings, because that's a service that many new ICOs request and are willing to pay huge amounts of money for. And so to not offer something that not only increases demand to your site, but also just directly makes you money, just seems like an extremely weird and bad move from them as a business.
So the listing of ICOs and exchanges is kind of like in a weird area in terms of like regulation. So from what I understand, like ICO projects might be violating security laws if they directly contact exchanges looking to like lock down listings. So the way the market works now is like there's these intermediaries where like an ICO projects will talk to an intermediary who will then talk to the exchange or talk to another intermediary who will get the listing on the exchange. So it appears on paper they have no like direct interaction with getting a listing, when in reality they do. But yeah, I agree with that. There's like the cost for getting something on a site like Binance right now is pretty absurd. Like I've heard of projects paying up to a few hundred Bitcoin, maybe more, in order to just get a listing on an exchange. So obviously the Poloniex markets are a bit smaller, but they can still charge a decent amount to get a token listed.
Seems like they're just being run poorly. Although the buyout was interesting to me because it seems like they're going such a different direction with it. Like this is not going to be like cryptocurrency trading. They're not looking to add in a bunch of new currencies. They're looking to tokenize. I remember reading the list, and there was a bunch of different stuff they're trying to tokenize, like real estate. I want to say was on the list.
Yeah.
Art was on the list.
I mean, there's already like ICO projects or crypto projects that are doing that specifically for. I think the one for art is called. It's named after some famous artists, starts like Mekanas or something like that. And then there's like a few real estate projects. I think they're all garbage, honestly. But yeah. So I think what's going to happen, and especially like within the U.S. in the next few years, if tokenized securities become a thing, I think there's like two major players right now. One is Circle and Poloniex, and the other is T0, which is a security exchange that is from Overstock.com. That if it becomes regulated, I can see both becoming big, just because it makes more sense to have security tokens than like these kind of retarded utility tokens that people are coming up with that don't really have, but are trying to skirt around security laws so they can issue them. So if security tokens does become a thing, I see those two as major players in space.
Well, what are your thoughts on T0? Didn't they have some kind of issue like a few months ago? I remember reading about. God, I wish I could remember specifically what happened.
I haven't been following the project very closely since maybe January when I had a talk with them. I was actually thinking of investing, but the terms for Americans was like passing their KYC was pretty brutal, and it came to a point where I believe their token was locked in at a USD peg instead of at a cryptocurrency peg, and the cryptocurrency market had dropped a lot since like mid December, early January, mid January, to a point where like early investors got a substantially better deal than later investors, just due to the fact that if you're investing in Bitcoin, you're investing in Ethereum, or you're investing in like whatever crypto assets, they're, even though like they didn't liquidate any of the cryptocurrency that they took in from investors a month ago, that the USD peg was a lot better for them, meaning it was like a lot worse for future investors. I spoke with someone recently that said like they're doing their best to be compliant. Like their lawyers are working directly with the SEC. They're in their offices every day. So yeah, I don't know.
Interesting. Got it. All right. Well, actually, this is a good subject to talk about then. What are some currencies you are excited about? Ones that you like what they're doing, you like where they're headed. Maybe some like, larger cap ones, some mid to small cap. Anything you're interested in, man. What excites you right now?
Let me pull up CoinMarketCap. See what the cheap hot alts are over there.
I heard Ripple's still pretty cheap. Not even $1. That's got to be a pretty good buy.
For me, Omise Go is like a really awesome project. Maybe it's because I'm based in Asia, and the offices are like literally like across the street from where I live, in Bangkok. But I think in 2018, like late 2018, they're going to have right now it's only issued as an ERC20 token, but later this year they're going to develop their own blockchain. And I just know like some of like the partnerships that they're lining up in terms of like the real world industries that would use their platform as like a payment settlement solution, whatever you want to call it. It like, to me, it has like one of the most direct real world use cases, whereas a lot of these tokens, especially these tokens that don't have their own blockchain, that are like issued tokens on like either the net 5 standard or the ERC20 standard, they're going after like this, how would I describe it, like almost like a pipe dream, right? Like we're eventually going to develop something that could revolutionize the industry, but it's years away. So I think for me, projects that have, direct real world implications or direct real world impact within like the next like 6 months to 1 year are going to be a lot more valuable than the ones that are supposedly paradigm changing, but can be years and years down the line.
Definitely agree with that. I think I look at the list of the bigger ones, right? EOS, Cardano, IOTA, although maybe not as much so as the other two for IOTA, but still in that category. Tron, I guess those are the main ones in like the top 15, 20. I would say that I have never been very attracted to investing in any of those. I feel like anything that's that far down the road, you just don't even know if they're going to accomplish anything they're setting out to do. And,
well, like I think some of those, like IOTA obviously operates on its own blockchain. Cardano, I don't really follow. EOS, I think I don't follow EOS that much as well, but I think their testnet is live and their actual mainnet will be live like later this year. So I think the main issue though with EOS is like, okay, so this is kind of fucked up, but EOS is essentially an Ethereum competitor. It's like what people in the space are calling like a blockchain 3.0 or blockchain 2.0. It's like it's something that's like an improvement on a consensus ledger with basic smart contract technology. So what they did is they had like this massive fundraise where they raised like an insane amount of money, and most of it was in Ethereum. And like it's all in a public ledger. Like Ethereum is a public ledger. It's not a private coin. So you can track like what they're doing with the Ethereum. And I think like in the past 2 months, a lot of the price shift from Ethereum being like say like over $1,000 to it went down to like mid $300 was from EOS selling their Ethereum on major exchanges. Because if you look at like the transactions like out of their wallet, I mean they're holding like an insane amount of Ethereum. So it's just kind of funny to me that like an Ethereum competitor raises money in Ethereum only to market dump Ethereum like right when they're about to launch their mainnet, and yeah, it's pretty funny.
I think a lot of projects realized during the bear market over the last few months of we raised all of our money in most likely Ethereum, but it was all well and good when everything was going up every month, and then when they see the fact that like the amount of capital they raised has gone from like whatever it was to 30%, I think a lot of them panicked and wanted to sell into something that was a little more stable, that wouldn't jeopardize their ability to actually fund the project.
I don't know about that. Like the funds that EOS raised, like they maybe need.
Sorry, I don't mean specifically for EOS with that example, but I'm saying smaller ones. I know for a fact that some smaller ones felt that way.
I'd say even the smaller ones, like the amount that these projects raise isn't reflective of like their actual operating costs at all. It's just reflective of how much they can get or what they value their token or their product at, right? So I'd say a majority, if not all, have even if they raise and say Ethereum and Ethereum swings maybe like 50 to like 70% from the time of their fundraise. I'd say a majority of them, like in order to operate their business or in order to continue development, need a small portion of what they raised in their crowd sale to function.
But it's not going to stop them from worrying about the total value of what they raised.
Yeah, but like you also have to understand that these people are like within the cryptocurrency space, that they're more logical than to raise money and not sell it at like the peak in order to panic sell at the bottom.
I mean, you say that, but like some of the timings on the sellings, like EOS wasn't selling when it was going up.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean,
yeah.
like,
I mean, maybe they were. I'm not sure. I just know recently, just because I think one of my friends set up like a bot on Etherscan, which tracks all the major all the major wallets for these big ICOs, and then the bot indicates whenever money moves out of their wallet, or money moves in, but like rarely money moves in. So it tracks when Ethereum specifically moves out of their wallet. And I think there's like a Twitter account linked to the bot. I forgot the name of the Twitter account, but it just says like it'll auto update whenever a major project is selling their cryptocurrency.
It's actually
pretty cool.
Sweet. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So what other ones are you excited about then?
In terms of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, which
or
one?
In terms of
You strike me as a Ripple kind of guy.
I'm trying to think. So like I guess the things that I'm like excited for, or that I have investments or speculation or whatever you want to call it in, are native tokens to exchanges where, like for example, but Binance has their own token, Qcoin has their own token, Bbox has their own token.
Those are some of the only examples where the currency actually is tied to some underlying value.
Yeah, so like what I was saying earlier about like real world value or real world implications, like as long as these platforms are used and you're getting some financial incentive to use these, whether it's like a discount or some sort of pseudo staking mechanism where if you hold your tokens within the exchange, they'll issue more tokens, or specifically what Binance does is that they have they burn a certain percentage of their tokens every quarter, I believe. That's been based on the net profit of Binance, which makes it overall deflationary. I think those are going to be around in terms of they'll maintain their value for a lot longer, just as long as the total volume on their respective exchanges keeps going up, which in my opinion, it will continue to go up. Like the limiting factor for exchanges right now is that their support can't handle the workload in terms of new signups. Like you see this with Bittrex, you see this with Binance, you see this with a few other of the major exchanges. They actually shut down.
Bittrex allowed people to sign up again and then had to close it down after 30 minutes. Did you see that?
Yeah. I think Binance did that too, like a few weeks ago, where they opened up registrations again, and they had 250,000 people sign up within like a day or so, and they're like, all right, guys, this is who we got to handle these signups. So as long as like cryptocurrency becomes more mainstream and you're like speculating in coins that like actually have value on these exchanges, I think those tokens are much more likely to maintain long-term value than the token, quote unquote, utility tokens that are issued by like these various projects that in reality don't have any value. And even if the project that the token represents succeeds or does something, it may or may not be reflected in the token price.
I definitely.
I'm also like bullish on. I guess like I'm not bullish on most of, if not all of, the decentralized applications that only issue Ethereum based tokens. Like most that I've seen, even if they develop like a decent dApp, it's just like it's never used, and there's no real point for having a token. So I generally hold tokens that like have their own like consensus ledger, have their own blockchain, or in the near future plan on releasing their blockchain rather than just issuing like a Neo-based token or Ethereum-based token or like a BTC Omni layer-based token.
What are your thoughts on the privacy coins?
It's a broad question. I think that they get like a bad rap, and rightfully so, because a lot of the privacy coins have and will be used for nefarious purposes. But I also think that so I think there's like two schools of thought. I think like the first school of thought is that blockchains or public ledgers should be that public, right? Like all transactions should be verifiable since the inception of the respective blockchain. And the other school of thought is like individual financial transactions should be private and should be known only from like the sender and the receiver and not publicly broadcast. I'm a little bit indifferent or unsure of where I stand. I do think that there is merit to saying that a public ledger or a ledger should be public, because it allows for like transaction to be verified, supplies to be audited, whatever. But then also there's part of me that thinks that like a lot of the financial transactions that I make or that any individual makes should in theory be kept private. I think specifically with the quote unquote private C coins, a lot of them may or may not be completely private in terms of like what they're advertising and what they actually do are fairly different. But yeah, I think there's like a lot popping up, and I think there's a lot of pre-existing projects right now that are going to have some sort of protocol upgrade, or will be developing a protocol upgrade that has some sort of private send function.
Sort of like what Dash did.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dash, I believe, is just a Bitcoin fork, or just like not necessarily a fork, but just like they copied a lot of the Bitcoin code, but they changed the hashing algorithm, and they, instead of being 100% proof of work consensus ledger, they, what is it, like 40% proof of work, 40% master node payouts, and then like 20% goes to, I haven't looked at like the economics of Dash in a while, but it's something like that. Yeah, so like Dash, and then like all the derivatives of Dash, like off the top of my head, Pivx, which is just like a Dash fork that was initially intended to be a fork that that was like a private version of Dash, I believe. They implemented the same zero knowledge proof technology that that Zcoin uses. The simple explanation of how it works is if I send you a token, I burn the Zcoin or the Pivx that I send you, but I have like proof of burn, so I can send you a new one, and then you will get one, but it wouldn't be like the same one that I'm issued, right? Does that make sense?
No, I don't exactly understand what you mean.
All right, so if I believe this is how it works, like zero knowledge proofs is if I send you a coin, instead of me directly sending it to you and being it tracked on a public ledger, I would essentially burn that coin, so it's not linked to my wallet, and I'd be issue a new one, which then I can like deposit into your wallet.
Oh, I see. So then it doesn't show.
It doesn't originate from anywhere.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that system is pretty cool. The Zcoin protocol, and then also like any coin that uses that technology. Although I'm not a technical expert, so I don't know. It might be garbage.
Well, I mean, so how big? I mean, we all know it's going to be big, but how big do you see Verge getting? I mean, I think the sky is the limit. I could see this being the future of privacy. You know, how big? What are you thinking? Maybe the biggest, maybe the third biggest. What are your thoughts?
What is its market cap now? Like over $1 billion?
Well, they took a hit when it turned out the biggest thing ever in the history of cryptocurrency was partnering with Pornhub. But it's still $1 billion. It's still a fairly large currency.
I didn't realize people paid for porn.
Well, apparently they do, JMO. I can't say too dialed in that industry specifically, but you know what? It appears that there are people who do, and you can use your Verge for that premise. I mean, okay, so you know what? I'm gonna do something that I rarely do here. I'm gonna argue a positive side to Verge for a moment, which is this actually was a pretty great marketing ploy. And Pornhub is a huge online entity,
Yeah.
or ThinkGeek, but I just feel like the way that they did it was just so spammy and like scammy and like ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true, but I was reading somewhere on Reddit that so they had like a deposit address for like public donations for Verge for this partnership, and a lot of funds moved out of the wallet, and it was supposed to be for, I think, ledger integration is what they said, but the market value of the funds that moved out of the wallet was something like 100 times what it would cost to get Ledger to integrate a coin. And then like someone from Ledger came into the Reddit post and said, yeah, like we have no idea, like no one from Ledger knows anything about any integration from Verge. So it seems kind of suspect.
That was on the Verge currencies subreddit. I remember seeing that. Like, no, it's for Ledger integration. And then it's just like the head dev at Ledger, like, we have never talked to anyone here. It's kind of sketch.
But they moved, like the market value was like almost 2 million at the time. That's a fairly expensive integration.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I'm sure that they're doing great things with the money now. What are there any coins that are bigger you think that are kind of scams or I mean, I know the word scam,
yeah, like a ton of them
can mean different things to different people, but I feel like you're going to give me some things. So let's just go ahead and go with it.
Like off the top of my head, Ripple. It's like the third biggest coin. It's completely centrally controlled. Not only is it centrally controlled, like the I don't know if this is correct, but I believe the ledger is mutable. Like they can like go back and change transactions like however they want. And I think like since inception, there's like weeks and weeks of the initial ledger missing from the current ledger. But the main issue I have with Ripple is just like it's completely controlled by the did I say ledger? My issue with Ripple is it's completely centralized and controlled by the Ripple Foundation. But I think that's a problem with like a lot of like the major coins. Like for example, Neo, which is used to be Ant shares. It's like very centralized as well. Like I remember going to a conference once and I was listening to what's his name, Da Hongfei, the CEO of Neo talk, and he was talking about how like it's great that the Neo Foundation has like billions of dollars worth of Neo because they can invest it in like the Neo economy and like Neo based projects. But in my opinion, it's never good when like the central like a coin isn't reasonably distributed or like the central governing body has that much supply. I also think like on the Neo network, there's like I think like 12 or 15 nodes, and a majority of them are owned by the same guy. So there's literally one guy that can just shut down the entire Neo blockchain whenever he wants.
Seems like a potential issue.
Yeah.
Do you like Neo though?
What do you mean by like?
Well, I mean, like, do you like it? I guess I kind of mean as an investment, but I mean, there are a lot of people that are very gung ho on Neo being the Ethereum killer that takes its market share. Do you agree with that?
A little bit. There are quite a few projects that are issuing Net5 tokens instead of ERC20 tokens. So it's essentially just a token on the Neo blockchain versus a token on the Ethereum blockchain. And in turn, they're also raising funds in Neo rather than Ethereum. Although a lot of the Neo-based projects, I think, are also accepting of Ethereum as well. But as the same, a lot of the Ethereum-based projects accept like a variety of cryptocurrency. Other than that, I don't really know. Like in my opinion, the current price of Ethereum or the current utility of Ethereum is mostly to invest and divest or speculate on ICO projects or new tokens that most their trading pairs are like versus Ethereum. So in order to buy a token, you usually have to purchase Ethereum first because there's no like USD market for any of the lower cap coins. And there's sort of a similar situation happening to Neo. Like there's a lot more Neo-based exchanges coming out. There's a lot more decentralized Neo exchanges. There's a lot more exchanges that are integrating Net5 token support with the anticipation of more companies or more projects issuing Net5 tokens that would want to be traded like on their site. So yeah, in that sense, I can see Neo being competitive with Ethereum. Do I like it? I mean, I guess the only fundamental problem I have with it is just like the nature of the coin, like the centralization of who holds the funds, and like the centralization of their actual network.
Talking about Ethereum here for a moment, there are many people that have a bearish view on Ethereum in the let's just say midterm, where basically as the ICO market falls apart in a lot in certain areas, that the demand to buy Ethereum to invest in projects will also decrease. Do you agree with that logic at all, or do you feel like Ethereum has a large enough network of people using it for other reasons that won't drop the price, or what do you think?
Specifically for Ethereum, though, I think like on the technical side of things, if they can introduce their Casper proof of stake system, and if it's like a legitimate system, which a lot of people I talk to that are like more technically astute than me think that it's kind of garbage. And also just like in general, like proof of stake in order to secure a ledger versus hashing power through proof of work is kind of garbage as well. But if there's actual like protocol upgrades, like I know they're working on a few things that comes through for Ethereum. You can see, I think it'll maintain its price. On the flip side, though, if all these ICOs are, if people are buying Ethereum to in turn invest or speculate in ICOs or other tokens, it works the other way too, where like if you're taking investment money in Ethereum, Ethereum's a lot less liquid or a lot less valuable as a real world currency than say like fiat or whatever else, even Bitcoin, where you're likely unable to pay like business expenses. You're likely unable to pay a lot of your workers through Ethereum. Although I assume like most of the developers are taking Ethereum as salaries instead of, or cryptocurrency as salaries rather than a fiat payment. But it works the other way around, because like the people that like are collecting Ethereum will have to sell it in some way eventually, which would stagnate or stifle the price. And you see that happening now, like with like large ICOs like EOS selling as well.
Right, it creates large holders who have more incentive to sell than with maybe some other currencies.
Yeah, I mean, like if the narrative is that people are buying Ethereum only to pump, and that's pumping the price only so they could like speculate in other tokens, it's not exactly how the market works. Like it's like a two-sided market where the Ethereum will then be exchanged back, therefore suppressing the price. So possibly the price, like it's hard to say how much of the actual value of Ethereum right now, or the current market price, is based on people buying it specifically to speculate on ICOs rather than like for its own unique merits.
Yeah, Ethereum does have a lot of cool cool upgrades they're coming out with this year, but it seems to me like there are a sizable number of people in the technical community, of which I'm obviously not a part of, that feel that proof of stake, at least with the way that they're trying to go about it, just is not going to work. So I guess like I don't really hold much Ethereum at this point, because I just feel like there are a lot of negative things that can happen and not too much upside compared to maybe some of the other competitors that are entering.
Yeah, so from what I understand, like the Casper system will be like a hybrid proof of stake, proof of work. In my opinion, proof of work is like the only is the only real way to, like, I don't know this technically, but it's like the only real way to secure a blockchain. Like people were complaining about like high fees a while ago on the Bitcoin network. In my opinion, like the fees that you pay on any network to miners that provide like tons and tons and tons of hashing power, that hashing power isn't like for nothing, right? It's to secure the actual network.
That does make sense to me. All right, man. Let's go. We got a couple last topics here to discuss before we call it a day. I'd like to reference a tweet here from December 23rd, 2016, from Cunty Cakes 123, otherwise known as Jason Mo. If Bitcoin equals 1,400 by June, again, this is in December 2016, I'm getting a Lambo. Fuck it. See you peasants at the Rio. Okay.
It's a good thing I didn't sell my Bitcoin to buy a Lambo. That would have been a mistake.
So where's the Lambo, bro?
Depreciating assets. Well, why would you ever want a Lambo?
But you said on the internet you were going to do it, and then you didn't back it up.
Yeah, I say a lot of things on the internet that I don't do.
That segues nicely into my next story, which is on June 10th, 2017. Might I note a time that you should have been spending your time buying a Lambo? You tweeted out again. If Bitcoin hits 14K by next June, I'm buying the Rio and turning it into a parking lot.
I should have done that.
So I think people are wondering, why is the Rio still standing? What's going on there?
The Bitcoin's not at 14K right now.
That's true. Afford it. We got there. I guess tough times now.
Yeah, tough times. No Rios on the agenda.
No Rios. I guess maybe when Bitcoin's 140K, you'll have to build your next thing on it. All right. Thoughts on the Ian Balina hack? You tweeted something somewhat strongly worded the other day that he was essentially trying to blame Ledger for his funds getting stolen, and you basically called him an idiot. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, no, he made a tweet saying like, okay, so the way he got hacked was he held his private keys in an Evernote file that was linked to his Gmail. He didn't have two-factor authentication on either of the accounts, I believe, and his backup account or his recovery account for his Gmail was his old college email or some old email that he doesn't have access to anymore, and he knew was compromised because he attempted to get back into the account and he wasn't able to, and then like he eventually gave up. So like right off the bat, like that's got to be like one of the dumbest ways to if you're holding like millions of dollars of in cryptocurrency or millions of dollars of tokens or whatever. That's got to be one of the dumbest ways to store your tokens overall. But he made a tweet like saying like even hardware wallets have vulnerabilities, and he like posted a link. The link was about Ledger, and that vulnerability was patched like 2 patches ago in the Ledger firmware upgrade. And I just found it ridiculous that he sort of just demonstrated like how to not handle cryptocurrency, right? How to not store crypto, especially if like you're a public figure and you're posting screenshots of your portfolio saying like, look how much money I have. You're obviously going to be a target for hackers. So like him of all people should be, more in tune, or at least more. Okay, so the other ridiculous thing I find is he worked at IBM for quite some time, right? So it's not like he's just like a new guy off the street that doesn't understand like basic two-factor authentication. I assume like in like IBM company accounts, like you're required to have like a unique password. You're required to have two-factor authentication if you're dealing with at least sensitive information. But yeah, so he I don't know what the point of that tweet was for him. He was saying that be careful, guys. Hardware wallets sometimes have vulnerabilities. So like, what is the solution to store private keys on like an Evernote file that you don't correctly protect? It seems like kind of ridiculous to me. Like, but whatever. I mean, he paid for it, so.
Well, it's certainly ridiculous. It actually reminds me of a very similar story that happened to Trayvon James last year, where he claimed that essentially a very similar story. Someone got his email or something, and he lost all of his money. So he's in very, very good company there on the list of YouTubers who have gotten hacked and lost all their funds. I have to say, when I see a story like this that is this stupid, it seems in some ways like there's a shot at being fake. I'm not saying that it is fake. I don't know like what I don't know what proof he offered that the money.
Okay, so I thought that as well initially. I mean, like what first ran through my head was like, he can't be that stupid, right? Like he can't be that stupid to do that, especially if like you're a public figure. But So like all his wallets now are public, and I just did like a quick search of like transactional history on all his wallets. And what's crazy is that I actually thought that, you know, a lot of the Blockfolio stuff he posts on his social media, the numbers are like kind of made up, because like no reasonable trader keeps track of their, you know, like profit loss like positions on the Blockfolio app and then just take screenshots of it. They have some sort of like a better tracking software or better tracking tool. But then if you look at his transactional history for the tokens that he claimed to buy and sell, it's all there. It all seems like very legitimate. Like earlier this month, he had some disagreement with Min Kim from Icon, and he like decided to like anger sell all his Icon, and it just shows up on the Ethereum ledger. Like he sent 140K Icon to the Binance wallet, his Binance wallet. So that's a cool thing about publicly verifiable ledgers. It's like you can just go back in time forever and see if like if you know like someone controls like X address, you can see like exactly what they're holding, when they're selling, when they're buying, what they're buying, like what they're holding. So like his numbers actually add up to his numbers in his accounts actually add up to his Blockfolio screenshots, at least for like the past like few months when I looked. The speculation though is possibly he could be like avoiding taxes somehow. Okay, so a weird thing that happened was he made a tweet saying that like, my coins are going to KuCoin. Anyone know anyone from KuCoin that could, anyone from KuCoin support that I can get in contact with? But if you look at like the actual, because it's all like verifiable on like the public ledger, none of the transfers were actually going to KuCoin. They were going to like the biggest portion of the funds that he had hacked, I believe, was his Encash, Nucleus Vision. He was like an advisor for that, and that all got sent to Binance. He had a lot of Dragon Chain, which was sent to Ether Delta wallet, and a few other tokens were either sent to like different Ethereum wallets that aren't related to an exchange, or the exchange hasn't deposited the token deposit into their main wallet, so there's no blockchain trail to show like the wallet ownership there. But for all like the way Ether Delta works is because like it's like a decentralized platform. Is you have a deposit address, and then immediately when you deposit, there's like some sort of smart contract that immediately transfers your token from your deposit address to like the general Ether Delta address. So those are easier to track, and the same for Binance as well. And like obviously the Binance addresses and the KuCoin addresses are all publicly known. Like anyone can log on to say Etherscan and see how much of each token they're holding and how much Ethereum they're holding.
So what does that mean then if he said that he wanted a connection at KuCoin and then
I don't know. He deleted the tweet.
Weird.
But like I felt that was kind of weird because it was obvious where his coins were going, like that they were being split among a bunch of different addresses. Some were going to some exchanges, but none of the addresses, as far as I could tell, like looking through the transaction history, were actually going to KuCoin.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess it's one of those things where, given the type of stuff that I've seen, maybe he is just that dumb. But I am like, I lean heavily towards tax evasion or some kind of faking something or other, or I don't know. I always lean towards that side of things. It is truly baffling to me, though, truly baffling, how many people, and you're probably listening right now, I know some of you are, goddammit, who don't use 2FA on just simple things. Use 2FA anywhere you possibly can. Don't use SMS. Use Google Authenticator and have it on anything remotely important. There's legitimately no reason not to. And if you say, yeah, it's because I'm lazy, you're being an idiot. Secure your money, secure your information. Like, I just can't see any reason why to not use 2FA. And so often, every week or two, I find another person who I say, like, yeah, something about 2FA. And they're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, God damn it. How is that possible? There are still people who don't know about 2FA. How's that possible?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I like try to be as secure as possible. Like my 2FA is not linked to any of my emails. It's not linked to any of my phone numbers. I have an air gap phone that I use for 2FA. Yeah, I'm all about the security though. So
Yeah, I have the 2FA set up in the same way. As it's good to be secure in this
yeah,
industry,
yeah.
as has been made clear by Ian Balina. All right. So before we go here, what have you been up to? Is there anything you want to promote? Anything that you've been working on that you want the good people of the podcast to know about?
I'm working with a project called Ocular Tech right now. It's KYC technology. KYC stands for Know Your Customer. That comes from the banking industry. So like it's just like through some banking financial partners of mine. I believe that they're setting up a airdrop for tokens that should be soon, and looking to develop a digital identity platform and also introduce like financial services to that digital identity platform. But it's still like very early in development, and I'm like also like a very small part of it in terms of like what I'm doing for them.
Is there anywhere that people could go find out more information or to stay tuned or anything like that?
Yeah, so oculartech.io, I think, is the website. And there's a Telegram channel. Like, I don't think anyone's even maintaining the Telegram channel, but I think there will be a community manager coming on like the next few weeks as the project scale ramps up a little bit. But I've been spending quite a bit of time working on that as well, and then a lot of the time I've been traveling, like meeting people. Yeah, that's about it. I'm actually a little bit burnt out, like just dealing with cryptocurrency stuff like nonstop for the past like almost 9 months now. In terms of like a lot of the work for me, like whether it's like ICOs, whether it's trading, whether it's like arbitrage or OTC, it like really scaled up to me for me, where it like became basically like a full-time job. In terms of I just have like responsibilities like throughout the day of like what I need to do. And then it was nice to just like take a little break, and I guess I'm still on an extended break. Like I got back here like a week ago, and I've done this podcast with you. I had some meetings. I'm actually a little hungover today. I went and got drunk with my lawyer here last night, and we just like bounced like crypto ideas off each other. But other than that, I haven't been really doing that much hardcore work in the past like month or so.
Other than drinking with your attorney, yeah, that does sound like some hardcore work, JMO. I'm glad to hear you're putting in the hours. That's really what it takes to get to the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending some time to come on the pod, man. It was great to have you on. Always like to hear what you're up to. And thank you guys for tuning in for today's episode. If you miss anything, it'll be up on various podcast channels, as well as obviously right here too. And if you are new, hit that subscribe button, join the team. Good to have you guys here for the pods. Before we go, we do have another podcast coming up for you next week. Make sure to tune into that as well. I am exhausted. It is 12:30 a.m. I stayed up to hang out with this guy. So we're going to go ahead and call it a sess. JMO, thank you for tuning in. Fuck, man. It's so late. God damn it. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
Awesome. All right, guys. That's going to do it for me. I will see you again in the near future. Peace.